Hi there. In this lecture, we are going to be expanding on our knowledge of Python class and object creation within the paradigm of our to-dos app. We're going to be building a very simple first draft of our to-dos app and hopefully fill in a few of the gaps that we've missed out here with class creation and object instantiation. So for starters, let us create a new file which is going to be specific to the class. So this class is going to be called list item. So the best way that we can map our class to a real world object, so for example a list item, is how we should think about classes when we create them. So we wouldn't necessarily create a class called to-dos, as a to-do would not be a physical thing. However, a list item may well be a physical thing sitting on our to-dos list. So let us now create the class, and this class is going to be called list item. And again, open close brackets followed by a colon, and just make sure to indent this. Let me put a bit of space here. And there are four main functions that I would like to create, each of these relating to something called a CRUD. Now, CRUD is a very common computer science term used to acronym used to describe the main functions of a class or a very specific type of class. So these functions would be create, read, update, delete, CRUD. So I would like to create functions for each of these. So define create, define read, let's put a semicolon, define update, define delete. Great stuff. Now within the paradigm of our to-dos list, I think it may be better for us to create different function names for each of these. So the assumption is that when we create our list item, I would rather use our constructor function as we did before when we created our cat. So we would do this by, instead of saying define init, we would use two underscores, keyword init, and then two underscores again, remembering that we always pass in the self variable as the first parameter in all of our class functions. So now when we create a list item, this is going to be what is created. That is fantastic. So some things that we want to set about our list item when we create it before moving on would be attributes. So is complete, I think, would be a good attribute. So is complete by default should be equal to false. Now, what you will notice with Python is that there is a Boolean value that can be set. So by Boolean I mean something that is either true or false, and these are the only two values that can be set for this specific variable. So this can never have any other value other than true or false. It can never be null, it can never be zero, it can never be a string, it could never be a number, it can only ever be true or false. So this keyword is obviously not happy here, even though I'm writing out the word false. So the way that we correct this in Python is to capitalize our booleans. Now this is fine in Python because we will never be using anything else other than true or false. Fantastic. So by default, false is perfectly okay for is complete because we are assuming that when we create our new list item, this new list item is not yet complete. The next thing that I would like to create is a string called title. Now this is the title of our task. So by default, I don't think that this should have a value. We should set the value when we create the list item in our init function. So let's do this by adding an additional value to our title, additional parameter to our init and called title, and then we can now set our self.title equal to our title. This is great. So later on, when we actually create our list item, so we would say list item is equal to list item, knowing now that this list item is set to this, also remembering that we need to keep the first letter of our variable declaration small, while we can make the first letter of our class declaration large. Now what we'll need to do is we'll need to set our title as the parameter in here. So let's say wash the dishes. So we are now setting that wash the dishes. So now we obviously don't want to mark this list item as complete straight away within this. So if we ever want to set the dishes to now be washed, it's not going to happen when we create the task. So we need a separate function or method for setting wash the dishes to complete. So let's create that method while we're here. So I'm going to define a new method and say completed set. Let's say set. Set is always a good keyword. Set as complete. So what you will notice is I can put sentences inside of my method definitions. I like to keep these as descriptive as possible without going too overboard. So set as complete is a perfectly valid method name. And what this will do is set self dot is complete equal to true. And now we have set this specific instance of a list item to true when we run this function. So we would run this function by saying list item dot set as complete, and that would now set this as complete. We just need to remember to pass the self variable into this so that we can use it, and because it is required with all class variables, or sorry, with all class functions or class methods. Lovely. In our read list, what we would ideally like to get out of this is to read multiple instances of our list. However, there is only one list here. So we should have a function called get all list items or something like that. But we are talking about a specific list item here. So what we should say then is get single list item. Now this may be a bit long, so I think single might be a bit redundant. So get list item could be a good name for this method. And all we want to do here is to return, and now return is a keyword which returns something, and what I want to return is self. So this is now not just the title, this is returning the entire instance of this thing's self. So if we were to echo that out, we would get two things. We would get all of the attributes, which would be is complete, which is either set to true or false, and we would get the title, which would be set to wash the dishes. So maybe let's do that and see what happens to list item dot get list item. Because it is returning the entire instance, we should be able to see everything inside of our list item as it is currently set. So what we are doing is firstly creating an instance of the list item blueprint or class and setting the title to wash the dishes. By default, is complete is going to be set to false. Then we are taking this newly created list item and running the set as complete method on this, which what it does is sets the is complete attribute of this to true. So again, because it is a boolean, it can only be true or false. So now is complete is equal to true, and then we are printing out the list item get list item. So whatever is returned from this is getting printed out, and what is returned is everything contained within our current instance of our list item, which is fantastic. Let's test this and see if we get our is complete true, because it is being set to true, and our wash the dishes title. So I'm going to head over to our console again, ls and see we have list item.py and possibly an old file that I was working on previously to this, so that is not relevant. And let's run list item.py and see what happens. What are we getting? Oh, we are getting indentation errors here. This is great. So I think the best thing to do here would be to remove these two functions for now. Actually, it might be better just to comment them out so that we know we still need to write our update function and we still need to write our delete function. So let us see. We are getting some more errors. Name title is not defined. This is on line 1 we are getting the issue, and on line 4 we are getting the issue. Class list item, that is correct. Title, I think we need to set a default value for title. Let's just see. Main list item instance, yes. We are now successfully returning an instance of our list item. Great. So now if we want to get something specific from our list item, we may need to call an additional parameter to this function here so that it actually gives us whatever we want. So two ways we could do this. The first way is we could pass a second parameter into this function. So we could say title or is complete and then just pass that back when it is returned. A better way, possibly a better way, is to chain or pipe our variable that we want to get out of this to the end of our function to our method that we call here. So we could say list item, which is now getting our list item instance, dot get list item, which is now returning self, dot title, which is now getting our title. This does seem a bit redundant because we could actually just say list item.title and it would give us our current title, but let's just do this to see what actually happens, to see if this works. And there we go, our title is returned. That is great.